Hey everyone, so I made a political compass video earlier tonight, and it got, so the problem is I had to delete it because the ads were targeting my location, and I had to private it because I have a stalker that stalks me and he will know my location, so I had to private it. It was a political quiz, and I thought, why not do the 8 Values quiz? Why not do the 8 Values quiz? This isn't a quiz that I've done before. My political views have changed a bit, and it has some different questions from the political compass test in general. So I thought, why not do 8 Values? It doesn't have any ads, so let's do the 8 Values. My political views have kind of changed. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. Both can be oppression, but honestly, I would generally say the government has far more power to be corrupt than a company ever does. At the end of the day, the government can overrule companies. The government is the ultimate authority of the country, usually. That's not always true. Like, I believe in some African countries, like I believe Nigeria, or is it Niger? There are companies that they basically run the government, and they're basically so monopolistic and predatory that they run the entire country. But generally, I would say that oppression by governments is more of a concern, so I'm going to disagree. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. This is occasionally. Occasionally, the government should intervene in the economy to protect consumers. However, it really depends on how much intervention we're talking about, what type of intervention. Interventions in the economy can actually be detrimental, and can affect a lot of things like consumer happiness and entrepreneurship statistics and things like that, business data. So honestly, the government shouldn't intervene in business and the economy too much because it can have a severe detriment on the economy. So I'm going to put disagree. But sometimes the government does need to intervene in the economy. The freer the markets, the freer the people. This is generally true. For me, I am not somebody that thinks that a nice car and a nice house is freedom, because you have to, so long as you have to pay for it, right, and you still physically have to work. That's not freedom, right? Getting a leather car isn't the same as not having to do a job and rely on the income and being able to travel anywhere in the world and do these month-long adventures because you have enough money to do so. Well, to be fair, month-long adventures don't have to require a lot of money, like the Appalachian Trail. I mean, you do need gear, but there are cheap vacations that you can take that are several month-long trips. But regardless, so basically what I'm basically trying to say is I'm not a materialist, and the main reason why personally I agree with this is because if the markets are not free, then it affects people's retirement, it affects people's stocks, bonds, properties even. There's a housing market, for crying out loud, and the interest rates right now from the Fed are very high, and they won't lower interest rates, and it's not helping anything. Inflation hasn't calmed down at all. It's actually gone up since the December report, and I believe the market reacted negatively to it. So what I'm going to say is I agree with it, but I am not a materialist. I'm not a materialist, I'm a capitalist. And also, if other people want to get items and be materialist, nice car, nice house, then they should have the freedom to, and the government shouldn't take that away by interfering with the markets. I generally gain from freer markets because it will help my retirement. So I will strongly agree. It is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens. I generally agree with this. Yeah, I think I can agree with this. A balanced budget is just healthier than to ensure welfare for all citizens. I think most of us can agree with it. Yeah. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. This can definitely be true when you think about tobacco companies. I don't know when this was. I believe this was back in the 70s. They basically try to persuade the public to that smoking was basically okay and it didn't cause cancer and it didn't cause all these problems. And I believe they did that for cigarette tax reasons. And nowadays there's a huge tax on cigarettes. But yeah, the private market has a bias. They have biases when doing research. So I think leaving it to the publicly funded research is better than leaving it to the market, such as universities' research. I would generally agree with this. Tariffs on international trade are important to encourage local production. I think I can agree on this. I don't know too much about tariffs, but I believe it has to do with international trade and restrictions on trade. And generally, you can have imperialist countries, such as China with the trade war, create a huge deficit to where there's no local production in the United States and there's cheap labor over in China, and the United States is at a huge disadvantage. I would say I agree with this, although I think this is more leftist than right wing. But I think some Republicans would probably, also agree on this because I am conservative in nature. From each according to his ability to each according to his needs. I haven't really viewed Marx too much or his arguments, but I know it's highly anti-capitalist, so I'll strongly disagree, although there is a huge caution. I'm slapping a warning label saying I've never read Marx, I just know he's anti-capitalist, and there's not much I can do rather than it's not like I can read Marx right now, so I'm just going to have to take it for what it is. It would be best if social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. I would say reduced, so this would be agree. There are several ways to interpret this question, such as disagreeing being I agree with reducing it but not eliminating it, but I think agree means reducing it to substantially. Reducing it substantially would correlate to the agree range, not strongly agree range. Social programs usually have a problem, such as welfare and I believe some medical benefits, where if you make a certain amount of money, you no longer qualify for those benefits. And what happens is that a lot of these people from these poor families, they basically say, look, right, I made $30,000-$40,000 on welfare. Right. First of all, they're very poor in general because they have a lot of kids they got to take care of, such as in the rural and city areas, minority populations. They have a lot of children they got to take care of. They don't have proper sex ed protection. A lot of them are fatherless, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of the neighborhoods are in poverty because of welfare, basically saying if you make a certain amount, you don't qualify for welfare anymore. And the problem with that is that you have to be making probably $20,000 a year more than welfare offers for it to actually be worth it, because on welfare you don't need to work, right? Whereas on a job you need to work 40 hours, and so if you're making $40,000 a year working 40 hours a week, it seems very it basically encourages people not to work, and the taxpayer will have to pay for them. A lot of these cultures in the rural and urban areas just don't see a way out of poverty because it's so generational. And so I think I would generally agree with this. I think charity is a more understanding sort of area than social programs, and they're more responsible. I remember doing a report where they didn't really have where they didn't, states like Massachusetts didn't have enough welfare officers to enforce welfare rules. So while these states have welfare rules, they're not being properly enforced as far as I'm aware. I've never even heard of welfare officer as being a job. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. I disagree with this. I think this is a government overreach. That is not the role of the government. Disagree. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. If you want to leave inheritance to your kids, then that is up to you, and that is your right. No leftist, no government bureaucracy crap has any right to take that away from you. Right? Inheritance is between you and whoever gives the money to you, and that is their right to give their money to you. There should be no question about it. Basic utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. I agree with this. I think a lot of Republicans, a lot of people would agree with that in general. That it would be very concerning if private corporations, well, electricity. Okay, I think roads should be publicly owned, but electricity should not necessarily be publicly owned, if that makes sense. So I guess I'll put neutral. Government intervention is a threat to the economy. Excessive government intervention is indeed a threat to the economy. It is a threat to businesses, profit margins, or profit gains in terms of companies. It is a general threat to the economy. Those with greater ability will actually explain why. Is because when you intervene in the economy, you put more regulations, you strike down businesses, you do things like whatchamacallit, price control. I don't. There's probably a more proper term for it. Basically, what happens is people's retirements, people's stock money plummets, right? Because it's all tied into those companies. So all of the middle class people, because middle class people invest in the retirement markets and the stock markets more than you would think, right? The rich own a huge percent of it, but that little small percent that the middle class, quote unquote, in terms of percentage, invests in. So let's say the rich have 95% of the market, the stocks, the corporations, they own 95%. Well, yeah, okay. That 5% is still significant to the middle class because that's most of their, they put $100,000 in, but compared to $100 million or $10 million, it's nothing. But to them, $100,000, to you and I, you people watching, that's a huge amount of money. So a lot of these middle class people are putting their retirement, putting their life savings into these corporations, stock markets, all of that. And if there's excessive government intervention, it will cut down on that. It will cut down on the number of jobs, the number of hours, maybe the salary of the jobs, prices will go up. So I can honestly say I agree with this. Sometimes government intervention has to occur though. Those with ability should receive better health care. I agree with this. I do think that maybe a public option should be provided, but as far as I'm aware, I'm very skeptical of having two-tier system healthcare where basically everyone has to rely on public healthcare, which is known to be kind of shitty in other countries despite them having a higher lifespan, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that it is necessarily the healthcare, but it could be something like the culture, could be something like genetics. I'm sure some cultures live longer than others, not to be a eugenics person, but yeah, there's other things that contribute to the overall lifespan besides healthcare. And generally what I find is that in the UK and Canada, they generally don't like a lot of immigration because they don't want the free healthcare system to be overwhelmed. And usually the private elitists usually have a higher private healthcare, a lot richer, and no middle class person can afford it. So I agree with a public option, but if you want to pay for better healthcare, you should. And I do not agree with the two-tier system, which is very predatory on the lower and middle classes. Quality education is a right of all people. I wouldn't consider it a right granted by God, but I will agree that every kid should have the right to a quality education. Not a right it's not a right, it's a privilege. Education is a privilege. But I believe, in terms of, I believe every kid should have an opportunity to attend a public school and get a job and be, be able to go to college, get a six-figure job from that. So I agree. The means of production should belong to the workers who use them. I strongly disagree. I am not a socialist. I believe there are companies where every single role has makes the same amount of money. So if you want to be involved in one of those corporations, one of those companies, that's good. That's good for you. That's entirely up to that corporation to share the profits among all of the workers, honestly. But I strongly disagree with this. The United Nations should be abolished. I generally disagree with that. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. As a superpower, I definitely agree. I support regional unions such as the European Union. I do not. I agree with a sovereign nation that is not a part of a conglomerate. And the problem is that currency is very unstable when you have a conglomerate of nations. So I would generally disagree with this. It is important to, yeah, that's what I was just explaining. A united government, I am not a globalist. I believe in free trade with some protectionism, but generally I do believe in free trade despite kind of liking protectionism against, some very invasive foreign government adversaries. But I am not a globalist in terms of government. I do not agree with the global minimum corporate tax that Biden and his phonies have basically dished out. It is important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strait. I disagree with I'll remain neutral. I think both are good. Wars do not need to be justified to other countries. I strongly disagree with this. This is like a barbaric fucking statement. Basically, it's saying that you should be able to engage in any war, and your nation should take over any nation because it's another nation. So it doesn't really matter what kind of atrocities or genocides or massacres or whatever you do, war crimes. There needs to be a justification as for a war, or else there will be significant impacts, sanctions, etc. against your empire, against your nation, basically, essentially. So I strongly disagree. This is a barbaric claim. Military spending is a waste of money. I strongly disagree with this. A strong military is successful for any nation. International aid is a waste of money. I would disagree with this. International aid can be very useful, and I think, there are times where we need to aid our allies. I'm not going to name which ones. My nation is great. I can agree, but there are some corruption problems right now in the United States. Research should be conducted on an international scale. It doesn't really bother me, but I'm gonna, I don't know, I'll remain neutral, I guess. Governments should be held accountable to the international community. I can agree, I could kind of agree, maybe, yeah, I'll remain neutral. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable. Really, violence is, an overthrow of the government. Here's the thing, right, is that often in corrupt regimes, when there's an overthrow of the authoritarian government, another one just takes its place. I don't really think violence is the answer to overthrow authoritarian governments. Really? I think that a change in the political institutions and systems with people is the best way to change an authoritarian government, and violence can have other victims besides the people that you're trying to harm. I guess I'll agree, but I do not like authoritarian governments. I'll put neutral. I just don't think it's the best approach to get rid of an authoritarian government. Religious values should be spread as much as possible. Neutral. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible. I'll agree, but it really depends on what you mean. I'll strongly agree, but it really depends on what you mean by that. If it means imperialistic kind of wording, then no, absolutely not. It is very important to maintain law and order. Yes, it is. The cities right now in America are very corrupt with all of the justices, our attorney generals, allowing thieves in New York City, Chicago, all these cities basically getting away with whatever crime they want 6, 7, 8, 12, 15, 18 times, and they never go to jail. There, some murderers, you know, there's a huge illegal immigration crisis. So actually, I would agree. The general populace makes poor decisions. I agree with that. Most people are stupid. That's my reasoning. No, I'm not really a fan of physician-assisted suicide. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from freedom. I'll neutral on this. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. I'll remain neutral. The very existence of a state is a threat to our liberty. I mean, there needs to be a state at the end of the day. There needs to be a government to protect the people and its interests. Regardless of political opinions, it is important to side with your country. Fuck that. You know, if I want to criticize my country, I should be able to. All authority should be questioned, I agree. A hierarchical state is best. I strongly disagree. A democracy is the opposite of a hierarchy, and basically, the people should be representing the people best. You elect a representative to represent you and what you think would be good for the nation. That's basically what democracy is. You elect somebody to represent you. The people will represent the people. Although you can kind of argue that the United States already is a hierarchical state, and it's basically an oligarchy. You could basically argue that for almost every single nation. It is important that the opinion follows the majority. I disagree with this. I am not I believe this is populist, but I might be wrong in my political terms. This is a very flawed argument, and there are so many problems with this. The stronger the leadership, the better. I agree. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. I've never really understood this question. Environmental regulations are essential. Environmental regulations are essential. However, the problem is that usually what happens is that the problem is that a lot of jobs are lost in terms of localities. Like certain cities have very strict environmental regulations, or certain states, and a lot of economic problems result. There's a lot of economic problems as a result. Higher prices due to building codes and building regulations. Lost jobs where companies won't move there. To hire, yeah, I mean, just it's okay to have. We should have some environmental regulations, but too many is detrimental. So as of right now, I think we have the appropriate amount. In fact, I think we have too many. So in the United States, so I'm going to disagree. A better automation will come from automation, science, and technology. I agree. Children should be educated in religious or traditional values. This is entirely up to the parents to decide where they want to put their kids. It should not be forced down a child's throat, nor should atheism be forced down a child's throat. There should be no mention of religion in public schools, and parents should have the choice where they send their kids. So neutral. Traditions are of no value on their own. I disagree. Traditions are very important. They can really be a backbone to society, honestly, and a lot of its morals. Religion should play a role in the government. Strongly disagree. Churches should be taxed in the same way other institutions are taxed. I'll remain neutral. I wish I could expand my logic on these kinds of arguments. Climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life. Honestly, I would say that world imperialism is a bigger threat to our way of life right now, where we are on the brink of Poland basically saying that NATO should get war ready to attack Russia, and if that happens, then China might attack Taiwan, because China will basically think that the United States cannot fight a war on both fronts, on two fronts. So I'm going to disagree with this. It is important that we work as a united world to combat climate change. I'm in agreement with this. in certain conditions. So here in the United States, I know this is a world question, but this applies to a lot of the Western nations, which is we're having a problem right now where they want to mandate electric vehicles on everybody, and they want to basically mandate electric trucks, like semi-trucks. And the problem is, if you want to tow anything, lift any heavy weights, if you need to go across the country, there's not the infrastructure, there's not the support, and there's not the miles, the lifespan of the battery to be able to do that. So I'm okay with combating climate change, but we need to come up with better solutions. And the problem is that these lithium-ion batteries, we can't really extend their lifespan too much. We basically found the battery's limit, and that's why we're having such a problem with the tech stagnation right now. There's actually a law on this. I forgot what it's called, but there's a law that basically says that the computation of a battery, we can only fit so much power into it. So I agree with this, but I do not want it forced down anybody's throats. If you want to go out and buy a Tesla, no judgment. If you want to go buy a hybrid, no judgment. Just don't force it down upon my throat. Society was better many years ago than it is now. I agree with this. The economy back in the 50s, 1950s in the United States, and honestly across most of the Western world was booming, was absolutely booming. But now with inflation, now with two-income household, two-worker household income, now with a collapsing quality of life, with housing becoming more expensive because of overreach of government regulation and bureaucracy, and the Fed just printing out money like there is no tomorrow, and all these useless bullshit majors basically, in the public sector, and there's a bunch of useless fucking jobs that taxpayers are paying for their salaries. The society is much worse than it is now than it was 50 years ago. Economically wise, and honestly peace wise too. In the 1950s, not 50 years ago. The 1950s, I believe, was, I mean, we have the Cold War, but I believe that besides that, most of the world was on peace. There was some area of peace after World War II, and I forgot what that period was. It might have been the 70s or the 80s. It is important that we maintain the traditions of our past. I will remain neutral. It's important that we think in the long term beyond our lifespans. I'll agree. Reason is more important than maintaining our culture. I agree. I don't really understand. There needs to be more context to this question. So if I'm answering something that most people would find horrible, I'm sorry. I don't really understand the context of this question, but I believe it's saying that being reasonable is more important than doing anything it takes to maintain our culture, in which case I agree to a point. I am a fan of multiculturalism as long as it's not detrimental to a nation. Like in Europe right now, where there's a massive inflow of immigrants taking over the jobs, taking over the healthcare systems, taking all of that, and basically people are getting really pissed and electing these far-right leaders. I don't know if they're far-right because the media is generally a piece of shit and will basically call anything that's a little bit conservative / non-establishment fascist far-right extremist bullshit, but I'm going to agree with it. Drug use should be legalized or decriminalized. I strongly disagree. It leads to many problems. Weed leads to schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, which are huge burdens on the economy, and takes a lot of it takes a lot of money out of the public healthcare system. I mean, you can research it. Weed has been linked to schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety, and the other drugs and alcohol lead to all sorts of crimes being committed because the area that regulates the impulse of the brain is affected significantly. Although I believe alcohol should probably be allowed because, number one, you don't use alcohol to get necessarily drunk. And a lot of people can work with alcohol without getting drunk. Weed and drugs, not the same thing. Number two, drugs have way more of a substantial impact. And number three, alcohol is not linked to things like schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety. So I'm going to strongly disagree. Alcohol should be allowed, and I actually agree that the legal drinking age should be raised maybe to 6, or it should be downgraded to maybe 16 if there's a parent. I mean, it's already legal in most states, where if you have a parent consent, you can drink at like 16 years old. Now, honestly, I think you should be able to get a beer if you're 16 years old after a hard day's worth of high school. Yeah, man, why not? Other countries have these in effect, as long as it's monitored by a parent until 18, and that's when at that point you should be able to get full legal alcohol. Maybe not strong alcohols until 21. Same-sex marriage should be legal? Absolutely. Have no problem with it. No cultures are superior to others. I agree, but there are some cultures that are really barbaric, fucking backwards culture, fucking Africa or Central Asia or whatever, where they fucking eat your heart out and shit. Seriously, or South America, fucking I have no fucking idea, man, but there are some cultures out there that are really uncivilized and barbaric. So I'll agree, but only to a point. Sex outside marriage is immoral. I used to be a Catholic candidate, I would say. Honestly, I don't really care what people do, but I'm probably never not going to have sex. I'm asexual, and if we accept migrants at all, it's important that they assimilate into our culture. I'm remaining neutral. I enjoy cultures. I enjoy food. I enjoy multiculturalism. But the problem is, if we allow all these migrants in and they don't assimilate, they don't learn the language, they don't respect the traditions of the country, they take all the jobs, they do all this. If we have too much multiculturalism in the country, we're going to end up with a situation like Europe, where all these far-right people are coming in and winning big seats and probably going to take over the governments, and there's going to be some radical problems. Now again, caution. I don't know just how far right these European parties are. Could be they're just conservative, mainstream conservative parties, and again, the media is basically really biased towards right-wing parties, right-wing conservative parties, and so I don't know how far right they are, but I'm going to say they're far right based on the limited information I've given and some of the disturbing backstories in Europe, and this is the problem. So I agree, I like multiculturalism, but there could be a serious problem. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases. I agree. There are ways like vasectomies, birth control, condoms being used, in which there's really no reason once life starts in the womb that you should get an abortion. There's not really a reason unless there's rape or incest, in which case I agree. That abortion may be an option, but rather than that, I agree that it should be illegal in most or all cases. Gun ownership should be prohibited with those without a valid reason. Here's the thing, right? I would agree that these semi-automatic rifles, and I think the national bump stock ban was a good thing. Bump stocks, the thing is that any school there have been many stories where school shooters just go legally get a gun and commit a big problem in schools. They basically shoot up schools, and I think it would be harder if we had stricter gun laws. The problem is that the Second Amendment basically says that people have the right to bear arms, and we shouldn't give up our rights because 0.0001% of the population who's paranoid schizophrenic like me. I'm not a risk. No, I'm not a risk, but I'm saying like I'm a schizo crazy guy, No, I'm not a risk. That's not what I was implying. But basically, because 0.0001% of the people are schizo, that we should basically make it so that nobody is able to own a gun. The fact is that if people are going to shoot up schools, then they're probably going to get it through the black market, and if it's illegalized, and they'll probably still do the same thing. So I strongly disagree. I support single-payer universal healthcare. I believe there should be a public option, but I am not for single-payer universal. Prostitution should be illegal? Nah, I think prostitution... Actually, I'll remain neutral. There are some arguments against prostitution and how it's eroding Western society. Maintaining family values is essential. Honestly, I was thinking about hopping onto Vegas and getting laid. So I have to disagree because I guess that is an option. But I can definitely see some arguments against prostitution that are valid. Maintaining family values is essential. I will Yeah, I strongly agree. There are huge problems right now where basically the government is taking care of your kids. That basically there isn't a parent there in the household that's going to nurture the child. So the government at the end of the day spends more time with your child than you as parents raising the child. And ever since the 1950s, when we've allowed two people to work, now society expects that two people will work, both the parents will work. And the problem with that is that both parents work, they come home, they're exhausted, they got to take care of the kids, they got to wash the dishes, they got to clean the house, right? And there's just not enough time to do that. Whereas the old system was the mother would stay home. And I have no problem if the father stays home and the mother works. In modern day, females work, right? And this is the thing with dating, right? Maybe females should pay once in a while. They're responsible. No, 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 no. Why did the door open? The door just randomly opened. I have no idea how that happened. My guess is that a blast of wind came through or something. I'm not really sure. Let me go get my phone real quick. Okay, I'm back. I'm back. So it was the cat just pushing up against the door. So, anyways, back to my point is that the government basically takes care of your children more than you do. And raising a child in this day with the collapsing economy, I am not in favor of having children in this day of age because of all the problems, dating culture, the economy. It's just not. You have to be upper middle class to raise a family. And honestly, if you're not going to spend time with your child, but you're going to allow the daycare system to basically take care of your kids, and you're going to neglect them, they're more likely to experience mental issues when they're older, and they're honestly going to not very like you very much. And so, it is very important that you raise your child and you don't let the government raise your child. And it used to be with the traditional system of the mother staying at home and the father working, the father was able to advance his career while the mother would take care of all the dishes, to clean the house, and take care of the child so both could come home and have a relaxing evening. So, I strongly agree. To chase all progress at all costs is dangerous. I agree with this. Genetic force on modification, I would not say it's a force of good. We should open our borders to immigration. I strongly disagree with this. This is a huge problem with the Biden administration right now. Governments should be concerned about foreigners as they are about own citizens. I agree. All people yeah, I agree, should be treated equally. But let's keep in mind what equally is. With the woke propaganda that's going on right now, basically you have women and minorities and the LGBT getting all of the jobs, getting all of the representation. They get months, weeks, days dedicated to them. And as a bisexual, I'm not part of the LGBT community. I have kind of gone on and off about joining the LGBT community, but I was always kind of an outsider, and now I've fully committed myself to not. I'm a bi and asexual, so I mean I'm attracted to guys and girls, but well I'm not. I'm like a kind of like a demisexual, gray sexual. Basically, like I don't experience much sexual attraction. But yeah, I think people should be treated equally generally. It's important that we further my group's goals. All ours, I disagree. Okay, so here we go. This is my values. 50-50, 53-46, 45 54, 64, 36.